You're listening to episode 130, where you'll be meeting Charlotte Mayer, who started her blog Sushi Tuesdays after she was widowed at 39 with two very small children. Since then, she's shared her grief and her growth in a new, soon-to-be published book as she finds grace and purpose in her next chapter. Building a business and life that blends contribution, fulfillment, and financial reward? Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the show for women in their 40s and beyond who are on this adventure. I'm Angela Rasmus, and I'm delighted you're here. Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Your Next Chapter podcast. This, of course, is the series Under the Radar, where I have tracked down some ordinary women, inverted commas, doing extraordinary things. There are so many stories of the goodness that Next Chapter women are bringing into the world, and it is an absolute delight to be able to spotlight and highlight some of these goings on from all corners of the world to celebrate and to sit beside the launch of my new book, which is Your Next Chapter: Ditch Your Doubt, Own Your Worth, and Build the Business You Really Want. Now, these wonderful women I've been speaking with are at all different stages of the next chapter change cycle, and they're getting up to all different things. And in fact, I need to put a little inverted commas around the business part of that description of the book, because many women are not necessarily building the traditional businesses, but they're making an impact through community, through charities, and through other endeavors as well. But all of them have that central point in common, is that they felt the pull towards something that they wanted to express and contribute to the world, and then they've got that courage, connected to that self-worth, and stepped forward into their next chapter. And the lovely Charlotte Mayer, who we're speaking to today from Pasadena in California, is one such woman, and I'm extremely delighted to be able to introduce you to her today. Hello, Charlotte. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Angela. I'm thrilled to speak with you today.
The thrill is mine as well, which is a meeting of the minds like this. One of the things that I love about having a podcast is the ability to, or the opportunity to meet kindred spirits that you didn't even know existed until you suddenly have this connection and start a conversation.
Oh, that's so true.
It's a wonderful thing. Well, one of the things that we talked about in the green room, so to speak, before I hit record on the podcast, was looking at what stage of the cycle of change you're sitting in at the moment. And we came to the decision that you're in delivery mode because this wonderful blog called Sushi Tuesdays, which we'll find out all about, but also the recognition that a change cycle is a continuous thing, and there's something else that is coming up for you as well as you move back into that design stage. But we'd love to just start with understanding the chapter that you're in now and what actually brought you to creating Sushi Tuesdays. So can you give us some of the background story, please?
Oh, absolutely. I sometimes, my kids sometimes say I need to come equipped with a trigger warning or a spoiler alert, just so your listeners can take care of themselves. I will be talking about suicide. And so if somebody needs to know that in advance, I do like to put that out there.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I was widowed when I was 39 years old, and my sons were then 6 and 8. And I was widowed to suicide. I had no idea that Sam had been so close to the edge, as it were. We'd been married for 15 years, and he was smart and kind and successful, and he took his own life, which surprised all of us. If you had told me that my husband of 15 years would have taken his own life, I would have wondered what you were smoking. And if you had told me that 5 years again after Sam's suicide that I would be happily married to a man who had also been widowed, and that I'd have 2 more sons, both teenagers, along with 2 rescue cats and an elderly dog, and that I would add a puppy to that whole mix, I would have said, whatever you're smoking, you should really share. I had a plan, and it wasn't that. But there is something about resilience and mental health that I felt I had learned so much, and I really wanted to speak out about these issues of mental health and suicide, because it's so important to release the stigma. We just have to speak about it. So that's how I started Sushi Tuesdays.
That's such an important realization about removing stigma. I mean, one of my very favorite way showers, as I refer to them in the book, is Brené Brown. And she talks about the concept of shame, of keeping shame in the closet, and it feeds on the darkness and becomes larger. And I think the stigma associated with things around mental illness, around addiction, around other, inverted commas, shameful things that we should not talk about is immense. I think it's starting to soften, for want of a better description, but that's only because of people like yourself who become committed to bringing a subject out into the open and allowing people to hear of the real lived experience rather than just what we might read about.
Absolutely. I think this is a space where we need to be honest with ourselves and with each other, because we all struggle. And if we didn't understand that before, the pandemic is certainly highlighting for us
Absolutely
how difficult it can be and how isolating life can feel and how very important it is to reach out to one another. And what's amazing is how many people are available when you do ask for help, when you do say something out loud.
It is, isn't it? It's surprising when we actually allow that vulnerability and we actually do open up. Suddenly that assistance is there, that compassion is there. And I know with my own experience, I remember asking myself, why didn't I ask for help sooner?
Yes. I remember a woman I didn't know her, showed up on my doorstep with dinner for me and my sons. And I often think about her. We have no idea who might be paying attention and really care. And I could talk for hours about just the simple, kind things that people did. I was so afraid right after Sam's suicide that I would be kind of ostracized, because there is a lot of stigma and shame around suicide that's different than a death by cancer, for example, that people didn't used to say the C word out loud, but now they do. So I'm hoping that we will do the same for the S word. But people showed up in ways that were just beautiful and humbling. And it is life affirming and humanity affirming when you see how much people really care, even though you're afraid of saying something out loud.
Yeah, it really is. It's one of those. I haven't had the experience myself, but I've had friends who have had a similar experience to what you and your boys had, and I've heard similar stories. Is that the compassion and the desire to help is always there, but sometimes people are unsure of how to express that. There is a little bit of fear around it, of saying or doing the wrong thing, and this is where having these conversations we can actually express our understanding that perhaps you might be afraid, but there is nothing you can really do or say wrong when you approach it with a whole heart.
I agree completely. I would have rather had somebody say something to me that was glitchy and fell flat, but at least they were trying to help. And then the silence. The silence is harder to take.
I can imagine. And this experience of then deciding to do some of the normalizing, having some of the normalizing conversations, that's why the blog began. And you also, I believe, speak about the topic as well, which I'd love to hear more about. But what this to me is, I often speak about how next chapters are built on skinned knees very often, and a skinned knee being some type of experience that has challenged you, has often involved pain, but it has helped you to expand, create or develop insight that you then are able to share with others, and yours is the perfect epitome of that as a concept. So talk to us more about how the blog came about, what it is that you do with it and you're speaking at the moment. What sort of impact is it having in your world and on the world of others?
When I started my blog, it was about probably 6 years after Sam's death. So it was a long time kind of in process. And what I decided was that if I could provide hope for just one person by sharing about my story, then it would be worth it. Because it is, as you can imagine, a deeply vulnerable place.
Yes.
And so with some trepidation, I drafted my first blog post and I hit publish. And one of the first people to respond told me that she had, in an email, that she had just lost her twin brother to suicide. And that my writing about my experience had given her hope. And she was my one.
Oh my goodness.
And I thought it just one person makes a difference. So that's where I started with Sushi Tuesdays. I should tell you the name for Sushi Tuesdays, when I was first widowed, it became clear to me that I would really need to take care of myself if I was going to steer the single parent ship. And it just happened that my therapist had a time slot on Tuesdays, and I had my favorite yoga class on Tuesdays. And so Tuesdays became what I called my Charlotte Shabbat. On Tuesdays, from the time the boys were in school till when school released, so, whatever that 5 or 6 hour window was, I went to yoga and therapy and nothing else. I didn't talk to doctors or lawyers or anyone with any letters after his or her name. It was just my time for me. And sometimes what I would do is take myself out to lunch. And the boys were so little, they didn't much care for sushi. So sometimes I would take myself out to lunch to sushi. And one of the first speaking engagements I had was at a children's grief conference. I was sort of exhibit A for how to, help your own children. So after I had given my first talk at this grief conference, a chaplain came up to me from a local hospital, someone whose father, by the way, had taken his own life. You find out you're in this club you didn't want to be in. Mm. And she told me, when you write your book, you should call it Sushi Tuesdays.
Oh, I love that future pacing. When you write your book.
Yes. And so for a long time I had, it took me a while to kind of work up to the blog. And I thought, okay, I'll start my blog with an eye toward writing a book. And so I ran the blog. I still run the blog, but for several years. And at the end of several years, I had lots and lots of pages of writing, but I didn't yet have a book. And so my next chapter is where I've landed now, where we're talking about, is that I have taken a little break from my blog in order to write the book, Sushi Tuesdays. I imagine it having the same title, but maybe it won't by the time it's out. But that's what I call it now, Sushi Tuesdays, the book. And when I lost my microphone. Are you there?
Yep, we're still here. All good.
When I first came up with the blog title, Sushi Tuesdays, I didn't think about what it looked like all in one row, Sushi Tuesdays. And right in the middle is a certain word that's not very child-friendly.
I just wrote it down.
But it's perfect because what Sushi Tuesdays is really about is dealing with the good, the bad, and the horrifying, and still finding humor and grace and not shying away from the difficult subjects. And so even though I imagined Sushi Tuesdays as one word above the other on a book title, when it came out in blog form, it wasn't exactly quite as user-friendly as I had thought, but I actually think it's kind of poetic. If I had seen it ahead of time, I might have changed it or edited it out. But now I'm grateful that it's there because it really does talk about the fact that we need to address these difficult feelings. And as you know, the feelings are not the problem. It's what we do in response to those feelings. And there are healthy ways and unhealthy ways to grieve losses. And we all have losses in life. That's just part of how it goes. And so finding healthy ways to deal with the difficult times is really what we are all about.
Oh, that is so true. That just pausing for that moment and acknowledging that we all have losses in life, and sometimes they're small, sometimes they're catastrophic, and there's all sorts of flavors in between. And that's where I think that there is actually that beautiful irony, that message that's in Sushi Tuesdays. When you do find that center word, there is a lot of that we have to deal with in life. And you're absolutely on the money in terms of the way that I look in the world as well, is that we can't control what happens, but we can certainly, when we breathe, we can respond rather than react to it. Or we can move past that. Or rather, I think actually we can't stop the initial reaction. That is just internal. It just happens. But with self-awareness and self-care, which you've gifted yourself as well, we can pause, and then we can actually form that response and not just stay in reactionary mode. And I think that's where the grace is that you talked about.
Yes, and that's where the progress really happens, because we don't want to forget. That would be the tragedy, is if we forget or if we numb things. But if we can remember in a way that holds all of us in a compassionate space, then we can continue to move forward, taking those lessons with us.
And I love that. I love the grace that is within that recognition, and extending that grace to ourselves. It's just as important as extending it out to the world, wouldn't you say?
Yes, absolutely. That's I'm a big fan of self-care and self-compassion, because how we treat ourselves does reflect how we have the capacity to treat others and to hold their pain. How we can hold our own pain with tenderness and compassion does reflect how we can hold somebody else's.
Without a doubt. And I think part of that, when I was reading through your story, and of course, lovely listener, most of the stories that you're hearing here on the podcast, you'll also find in written format if you like to read, like most of us do. If you just have a look on the navigation on the homepage, angelaraspas.com, you'll see stories, and you'll be able to read the summation here of what Charlotte is sharing with us today. But coming back, one of the things that you spoke about in that story is that when you began not only your grief journey, but your actual journey into how will I turn this into something that can help others, which you did so beautifully, as with that first woman who contacted you. You said there was no roadmap. And there was also this recognition that a lot of us, I think, a mistake, and I use that word very gently, but a mistake we can have in perception is that we'll start something and then it will go just linear, step by step by step, and then I'll get to that destination. But life can intervene, and when you were blending your families, you recognize that as a mental health advocate, you needed to put the focus on your children and the relationships, which meant putting the writing on the back burner. So that feeling of doing things in the time schedule that works for you, could you talk a little bit to that? Because I think we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves.
Yeah, we're good at that. It's so when I did remarry, I married a man who had also been widowed. So we had 4 still in some ways grieving children. And one of the things about children is that they revisit their grief at each developmental stage. So my younger son was 6, for example, when his father died, but then he had a major new development in when he was 12, and again at 17. So the children revisit this grief and their understanding of life and mortality and health at each new stage. And so when Tim and I blended our families, we had these 4 beautiful boys who still needed a lot of TLC. They are lovely young men, and now the so-called little one is 6'3" and in college. But the healing work is so important, and particularly because Sam had died at his own hand, it was really important to me that all of the children had the support that they needed to journey forward in a healthy way. And so I did kind of pause on the work and put the children forefront. And as you well know, blending a family is not for the faint of heart. When my older, I call them my sons, but at the beginning, stepsons, when Tim and I were married, the boys were 17 and 14, and my husband described it as walking into the buzzsaw, which is parenting teenagers. So it wasn't just the children who needed some self-care. It was the wicked stepmother as well. And blending is not for the faint of heart, but it is such an amazing gift. I remember very clearly the first time both of my older sons called me mom. And it still it makes me emotional still to think about it. And one of them told me during one conversation, he said, you're not my mom, but you're my mom. You know what I mean? As teenagers say. And it was perfect because I knew exactly what he meant. Yeah. I might not have given birth to him, but I am the one who does all the mothering of him as a young teenager. And so we develop our own relationship. I often talk with the kids about the daddy-shaped space in their heart, or with my older sons, the mommy-shaped space in their hearts, that there's no one will take over that daddy-shaped space in your heart, because daddy's the only one that fits there. It's his spot. But the thing about love is that it grows. And if somebody special comes into our life, then we'll have a new space for him or for her. And it doesn't cover up the daddy-shaped space or the mommy-shaped space. It's its own space. And we have really lived our way into that reality.
Oh, I just have to take a breath as I'm allowing the words that you're sharing to land, especially that last piece. The expansion of the heart. And we are amazed at the depths and the breadths of where it can expand to. And you took me back in time to when my bonus boys, as I referred to them, who were 3 and 5 when they became a part of my world, and are now like 33 and 31. Oh. So it's been a while. And I remember we were on a tour in New Zealand. We're on holiday, and I was pregnant with our their half brother, my son, who is now 21. So it's a long time ago. And we were ordering hot chocolate. We're on this beautiful cruise in a place called Milford Sound. If you ever make it to the South Island of New Zealand, you got to go there. It's breathtaking. But it was a beautiful day. It was clear. It was cold. It was crisp. It was one of those best days that New Zealand can create. And I was getting hot chocolate for the boys, and the guy making the chocolate said, is your mum wanting one? And my elder son turned to him and said, "Oh no, she's fine. She's got an XYZ." He didn't correct the guy. He didn't say, "Oh, that's my stepmom." He just said, "No, she's got." And I went, I remember it. And I also remember when the younger of the boys in the bath one night when I came in, shyly asked if he could call me mum. And it was like they still have their mum. They haven't lost their mum in the physical sense, but it was just that they were making space, a new space in their heart for me. And the way that you described it, I would never try and occupy the mummy-shaped space that was in their heart, but I was creating my own space in that heart as well, which is thank you for that description, because it just brought back some really beautiful memories.
Yes, it's really such a special relationship. As the bonus boys, as you say, I remember my younger son said to me once when he first had heard about adoption, he said, "Mom, can you imagine how great that would be to be adopted? Just because then they chose you." And I said, "Like Tim?" And he realized that this man had chosen him. And it's very powerful. I was sitting in the pediatrician's office once with one of my bonus boys, and we were chatting and laughing about whatever silly thing, and there was a young mom across the waiting room with 2 little boys, and she looked at us and she said, "Oh, I do hope that when they are your age that I will have the same relationship with my boys as you have with your mom." And so my stepson just smiled, and when we got out to the parking lot, he said, I wasn't going to tell her how we got here, but I do hope that she has that relationship with her sons.
I love it because of the conversations we have, because of the love that you've allowed to expand, and that expression about we lived into our reality. That was gorgeous, because that's what we do in our next chapters, be they in business or in life. I mean, we can have all the best of intentions, we can have hope, we can have plans, but life doesn't really take much notice of our plans. And so that it is our ability to respond, and so that we can create something beautiful. And I love the idea of expansion, of the woman who's listening to this conversation right now, recognizing that you can take a step in the direction, you can make a decision that you want to contribute, and it will unfold. It will unfold.
Yes. And you might not be able to predict. I couldn't have predicted exactly how it started to unfold, but that's the power in taking that first step.
Yeah, it is. And one of the things that you picked up on when you were sharing your story on the website was the importance of seeking support. Now, I know that you spoke earlier when you had your Shabbat days, you were taking care of yourself. You were reaching out and getting the support that you needed at that time. And then if we take that into another dimension, when you're creating the blog, when you're beginning to speak, when you're now writing your memoir, how important has support been going through those processes?
It's always so important. And we find it in different ways. Right now I have a writing partner that I'm working with. That's one of the ways that I have support. I have, my book group for my emotional support. I know you are a lover of reading as well. And I have I have a book coach, actually, that I have worked with on the book as well. And always, I have my therapist's number on speed dial. I don't see her as frequently as I used to in those early days, but I do still keep her number front and center to remind me that she is there.
Yes.
And I find a great help in meditation and stillness.
Yeah, the meditation and stillness piece comes up again and again in all of the interviews that I have. And I don't want to have people think that there's some sort of perfect practice, but it's the approach, it's the dedication to giving yourself some space and time to breathe. I know one of my biggest growth edges is slowing down. I want to do everything yesterday, basically, and it can be a good thing. I have this view of you can be in the balcony or the basement of your strengths. So when you're in the balcony of your strength, as it would suggest, the strength is serving you. So my ability to take quick action serves me in lots of ways. I don't tend to procrastinate a lot. I don't get tied up in that. But if you're in the basement of your strength, so it's really the not so good side, it means that I tend to leap first, look later, and sometimes just wish I'd stopped and actually caught my breath, actually breathed, actually found that quiet space and just gave myself some room for contemplation. I find that really tricky.
Yes, it is. It's not so easy. It seems like it should be so simple, but it's really not.
No, it doesn't feel like it. So if anyone has some extra tips, then I'm here with my pen poised. I'm looking at you, Charlotte.
Well, sometimes I meditate on my feet, by which I mean I take the dog for a walk or a run, and that is sometimes the most head-clearing help I give myself. I should have mentioned my dog as one of my supports first.
Yeah, we have a puppy he's just turned 1 in our home now, and definitely there is nothing no one's as happy to see me as that dog. It's the joy that they bring.
Everyone should have a dog when they have teenagers, because the dog is always happy to see me, and he's equally happy if I went to get the mail or if I left the country for a week.
They are, aren't they? I just love them. They're definitely spirits. Well,
love in a dog shape.
That's it. A dog-shaped hole in your heart that only they can fill, perhaps.
Yes, definitely. Oh yeah, they take a big space in the heart, the furry ones.
They do. But one of the things that accompanies us on this journey into our next chapters, even when we have support, is self-doubt. That's a piece that just is in the next chapter change cycle, right in the middle. So it accompanies you along every step of the changes that you experience is fear and doubt and uncertainty and misbeliefs and old stories that can hold you back. What experience have you had with self-doubt, and how have you managed to tame that beast or learn to sort of turn the volume down on it?
Well, yes, she shows up daily, I'm afraid. And it's helpful, first of all, to call her she. I don't have a name for her yet, but I do think of her as someone who's not exactly me, because even though her voice sounds like mine, she'll say things like, oh, you're too old to start this, or you don't have the right degree to do this, or the right experience, or nobody's going to listen to you, or whatever nonsense she has for the day. And I am getting better at hearing her, recognizing her as having something to say, and then putting her in a timeout because she's not helping me. So if I give her a little timeout, then I can get my work done. And she's not going to stop talking necessarily, but I am getting better at putting her in a timeout and not listening, and then I can just focus on the work that I need to get done today.
I love the visual of that. I can see her sitting in the corner, but what's in my mind is that you've taped her mouth closed. I don't know if you're quite that violent. But I love the concept of the timeout, and that's a really important point. It's one that I speak about in the book as well. I use the expression, it's your inner critic, which is that personification of your ego and your doubt that's coming through, who wants to keep you safe. She tends not to get noisy until she senses that you're on a growth edge and you're actually stepping into something that could be a bit risky in some way. Her job is to keep you small and safe. And I talk about the need to make peace with her, but a big part of what you're doing naturally with that is personifying her. Perhaps she doesn't have a name. Mine has a name. I apologize, and I have many times, to anyone who shares this name or knows somebody with this name, but mine is Horrible Helga in High Heels, because she tramples all over my dreams, or tries to. So I have this vision of her sitting in the corner doing her knitting, just knitting away until I start to go into a new area, until I am going to expose my ideas or, try something new. And then she sort of perks up. I can see her. She's looking over her glasses. And then she's like, uh-oh. And she'll throw the knitting down and come storming into the room and try and stop me, waggling her finger and saying, well, I think your critic and mine, they've had a chat, because she says you're too old and you don't have the right degree and you don't have the experience and people won't listen to you. They all seem to have a similar language, don't they? Yes,
that's so interesting. I can picture yours and mine having a podcast, which I think we should all delete before they post it.
I think we should. So we recognize then, and you've recognized, that self-doubt it's a passenger on every journey, isn't it?
It is. It strikes me as you're speaking that maybe the fact that she's been especially vocal is a good sign. When you say if her job is to keep you small and safe, maybe she gets louder when you are coming closer to finding what is your gift or your power or your right next step.
That is exactly it, Charlotte. That is exactly it. And it's the thing that this is one of these conversations, just how you are helping to normalize the experience of grief and how children and adults process it. This is a part of the conversation that I like to have and love it when we hit it in a podcast, because the woman who's listening to us needs to know that it is completely normal. It is no sign that you should not do the thing. It is actually directly the opposite.
It might be the opposite sign. That's right, that you're on the right track.
Yes, and I do believe that that's when she gets noisiest. So if you're hearing her clamoring at you, then take a breath, square your shoulders, give her a timeout, and keep on moving forward.
Apply masking tape as necessary.
Without a doubt. So tell me, this quote that I took from your story, I'd love to read it. It's the M.A. Kelty quote, because it's just beautiful. So it says, "Watch your way then as a cautious traveller, and don't be gazing at that mountain or river in the distance and saying, 'How shall I ever get over them?' But keep to the present little inch that is before you, and accomplish that in the little moment that belongs to it. The mountain and the river can only be passed in the same way, and when you come to them, you will come to the light and strength that belong to them." I read that and just had to pause and really allow it to land. It's the most beautiful, direction, so to speak, but more like a guidebook for moving forward into your next chapter. Just talk to us as we're bringing this conversation to a close, how you found that, why it resonated so deeply, and how it's played out for you.
Well, I was actually in one of my Tuesday meditation classes when the instructor ended the final meditation with that quote. And I was so captivated by it because at that moment I was a newly widow. I was a single mom. I was 39 years old and I had these two little boys and I had no idea how I was going to create a life for us. I was just trying to get through the day. And when that quote landed on me, I realized I had everything I needed for that one moment. And that's all we ever need to be, is in that one moment. And the next moment will have its own light and strength. And when we get there, we'll have it. But right now, we just need to be where we are.
That is beautiful. I can hear the connection. I can feel the connection and the strength that would have seared into you at the moment.
Oh, it so did. It was at around that same time, a friend of mine who's an amateur photographer sent me this picture that she had taken, and it was 3 agapanthus still tight in the bud, and it had just rained. So there were little raindrops all over the agapanthus and kind of a blurry background the way she had taken it, but there was sort of green and magenta in the background. And in the forefront were these 3 blooms that were still tight in the bud. And she titled it "After the Rain." And at the time, I was so much in the rain of grief and sorrow and fear that it didn't occur to me that there would be an after. When she sent me that, I could see that she believed that there would be an after for me, that just like those 3 buds would bloom into the agapanthus, that my sons and I would also bloom into our next phase. And I didn't have to know that it was true myself because I had a friend who knew it was true for me and I trusted her.
She gave you such a gift.
She did. I often think of those 2 things together, that when we will get there together.
That is a wonderful, wonderful way to sear that message into the heart and into the ears of the woman who's listening to us right now. Charlotte, thank you so much for being so open and vulnerable and just joyful as well. You've shown us the whole gamut. And I think the most important ingredient anyone can take from having the opportunity to hear, to connect with someone like yourself, is that recognition that even if I'm in the rain right now, there is a tomorrow. I just need to stay here now. And then that next step will reveal itself to us as it comes through. If someone would love to contact and connect with you, where do we find you in the big wide world?
The best place is my blog, sushituesdays.com. It's all one word. And there is a contact page with my email. So that's the easiest way to contact me directly.
Perfect.
And this has been such a treat. Thank you, Angela.
Oh, you're most welcome. You're very, very welcome. I'll make sure that contact is on the show notes on the website. And also when that beautiful memoir is released into the world, you must let us know so I can update the page, we can share it, and we can allow more people to come into your world.
I will definitely. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. And to you, my lovely listener, I hope that you have also connected with the beautiful message that Charlotte has shared with us today. Yes, there is a next chapter waiting for you. Yes, you may be in the rain right now. Yes, your Helga may be telling you that it's not possible. But you know that when you take the breath, when you follow your heart, when you really have that focus on contributing, that you have the ability to shorten and sweeten the journey for another person. And that's what next chapters are all about. They're about contribution, they're about fulfillment, and in a business sense, they're also about you receiving as well. And one of the things that you receive when you choose to take this journey is this beautiful opportunity to expand to your edges. And I guarantee you that there is a person out there who needs to hear and experience what you have to share. Just how when Charlotte put that first blog and hit publish to the world, and it just connected with that woman who had lost her twin, and it just gave her that hope in the moment. It may be a different thing that you are offering to the world, and that's perfect, because if we all had the same experience, that would not be useful. We need to have our unique experiences and insights that we can share. So gather up that courage, disconnect from that critic, and take that step forward, because dancing in the rain is definitely possible. So until we speak again, until you listen to another episode of the podcast, take very good care, and thank you for investing your time here with us today.